Hello, and welcome back to our channel. Before we dive into yet another fascinating and mysterious stories, I would like to invite you to watch, to like, and subscribe to the channel. Also activate the notification sound. Have you ever wondered how a man so strong, who single-handedly defeated armies, was ultimately brought down by a woman? Samson, the strongest man in the Bible, met his downfall at the hands of Delilah. But what led this woman to betray him? Greed, fear, or something even darker? Today, we will uncover the layers of this betrayal and understand how Israel's greatest hero fell, not in battle, but by choice. What really happened? Stay until the end and discover the truth. Behind one of the Bible's most tragic stories, Samson's story begins long before he was born. During a time of deep suffering and prayer, Manoah, his father, and his wife, an unnamed woman in the scriptures, carried the sorrow of infertility. In that era, childlessness was seen as a curse, and there was no greater desire for a couple than to have an heir. Manoah and his wife's fervent prayers seemed unanswered, until one day, something extraordinary happened. The angel of the Lord appeared to Manoah's wife while she was alone, and announced that she would conceive a child. Despite her barrenness, this child was to be a Nazirite, consecrated to God from the womb until the day of his death. Moreover, he was given a divine mission to be Israel's deliverer, a man chosen to free his people from the oppression of the Philistines, who controlled much of Israel's land at that time. This announcement was more than just good news. It was a supernatural event that marked the beginning of a much greater divine plan. Samson was not merely the long-awaited son of his parents. He was God's promise for the redemption of his people. His mother was given specific instructions on how to care for him. She was not to drink wine or strong drink, or eat anything unclean, and most importantly, the boy's hair was never to be cut. The Nazirite vow was a symbol of holiness, a separation for God, and this consecration was the key to the divine strength Samson would carry. Throughout his life, each strand of hair that grew on his head represented a direct connection with God, and as long as he remained faithful to this vow, God's strength would stay with him. Samson grew up with the awareness that his life was not his own, that he was unlike other children. While his friends played freely, he knew his mission was far greater. The rules and vows he had to follow were not just religious traditions, but signs of his dedication to a divine purpose. The strength he possessed was not of his own making. It was a direct gift from God, placing him in a unique position. He was not just a strong man, he was a man chosen to deliver a nation. But growing up with such a great purpose also came with challenges. Samson soon realized that although he was immensely powerful and gifted with extraordinary abilities, he was not free from human temptations. His journey would not be without failure, and in moments of weakness, he would give in to his own desires. The first sign of this came in his choice of a Philistine wife, which greatly troubled his parents. This was a reflection of Samson's inner struggle between his calling and his personal desires. He was drawn to this woman, despite knowing that she was not part of God's plan for his life. When Samson, still young, approached his future Philistine wife, his parents were reluctant, knowing that such a union would not bring blessings to Israel. However, Samson was determined and declared that this marriage would be an opportunity for him to begin his fight against the Philistines, as God had destined. This decision revealed an aspect of his personality. He was focused on his mission, yet he often made impulsive choices that over time would prove disastrous. Samson then began his journey of heroic deeds. He defeated formidable enemies and brought overwhelming victories to Israel. But what made him special was not just his physical strength. It was the presence of God in his life. In one of his most iconic battles, Samson single-handedly killed a lion with his bare hands, a feat impossible for any ordinary man. Later, in another memorable battle, Samson's divine strength was evident once again, but this time he used an unusual weapon, the jawbone of a donkey. The scene was set on a plain where 1,000 Philistines stood ready to fight him. Confident in their numerical advantage, The Philistines surrounded Samson, believing they could easily defeat him. But what they didn't know was that Samson was not fighting alone, though the field was filled with heavily armed enemies. Samson, with his incredible strength, picked up the discarded jawbone of a donkey. This improvised weapon, seemingly weak, became a lethal tool in the hands of a man empowered by divine strength. Samson wielded the jawbone like a club, striking down Philistine after Philistine. He didn't just defeat them. He crushed them, like an unstoppable warrior. Driven by a force beyond the physical, however, the Philistines were beginning to realize that Samson was not just a legend. He was a real threat to their rule, and at any moment they could take drastic measures to neutralize him. It was in this growing tension that Delilah entered Samson's life, turning his story into something even more tragic. The story of Samson and Delilah begins when he had already established himself as a hero in Israel. His unmatched strength and extraordinary feats made him a legendary figure, and he was revered by his people. However, despite his victories and the strength that accompanied him, Samson was above all a man like any other, susceptible to human weaknesses, and it was in this vulnerability that Delilah entered his life. Delilah was not just a woman of breathtaking beauty. She was someone with a clear objective, someone who had been chosen, either by her own ambitions or by external pressures, to play a role that would change Samson's destiny. She lived in the valley of Sir, a region situated between Israel and Philistine territories, placing her in a strategic position close to Samson's enemies. Her life was intertwined with the Philistines, and she knew that if she succeeded in bringing down Israel's strongest man, she would gain not only financial rewards, but also security and power. Delilah was approached by the Philistine leaders who were desperate to uncover the secret of Samson's strength. They knew that the only way to defeat him was to find the source of his power. Through an agreement, Delilah accepted the mission of discovering Samson's secret, and through several attempts, she gradually got closer to him. With a cunning that few could detect, she used her charm and persuasion to win Samson's trust, making him believe she was someone he could fully rely on. Overcome by his passion for her, Samson failed to realize he was being manipulated at first. Delilah did not directly ask about the secret of Samson's strength. She began with subtle questions, trying to uncover, indirectly, what made him invincible. Samson, though immensely strong, was vulnerable to human desire, and Delilah knew exactly how to exploit this. It was when she started using her femininity and emotions to manipulate Samson that the game truly began. She did everything to earn his trust, becoming his confidant and seemingly his devoted partner. Delilah's first attempt was subtle. She asked Samson if there was anything that could make him weak, if there was a way to defeat him. He laughed and responded with a lie, saying that if he were tied with 7 fresh bowstrings, he would become as weak as any other man. This was an opportunity Delilah did not let slip away. In the dead of night, while Samson slept, she tied him with fresh bowstrings and called the Philistines to attack him. However, with his divine strength, Samson broke the bowstrings as if they were mere strands of hair, and the Philistines fled in panic. Delilah, however, pretended to be surprised and demanded an explanation. Unaware of what was truly happening, Samson once again brushed off the conversation, believing that she was simply unaware of her actions. But Delilah did not give up. With each failed attempt, she became more determined. Her persistence was what truly set her apart from Samson's other enemies. She knew that the real battle was not about physical strength, but emotional manipulation. Delilah took advantage of Samson's passionate heart, pressuring him further, until he started to give in. He who had never shared the secret of his strength with anyone, began to open up. This was not out of genuine love or trust, but because of the emotional manipulation Delilah had carefully woven around him. With each passing night, she drew closer to her goal. Delilah's pressure increased day by day, and finally, exhausted and unable to resist any longer, Samson revealed the secret he had kept for so long. "My strength comes from God," he said. "If my hair is cut, my strength will vanish. and I will be like any other man." These simple, yet profound words mark the point of no return. Delilah listened intently, and, though she seemed moved, she was merely waiting for the right moment to act. When Samson fell asleep, she immediately summoned a man to cut his locks. And what once seemed impossible happened. Samson's strength vanished. Now that she knew Samson's secret, Delilah made the decision that would change the course of her life and the history of Israel. With the revelation of Samson's divine strength, she did not hesitate to act. During the night, while he was in a deep sleep, she carried out what had been meticulously planned. Delilah had Samson's hair cut, the symbol of his covenant with God, and without his knowledge, his strength was gone. But what Samson did not realize was that the loss of his physical strength also meant the breaking of his divine purpose. When Samson awoke, he did not immediately feel any different. He was used to waking up and sensing his power. But that day, something was wrong as he noticed his enemies. The Philistines, approaching, he tried to react as he always had, but to his shock, his body did not respond as usual. The strength that had allowed him to defeat thousands of enemies was no longer there. He tried to stand and fight, but the chains that Philistines had brought were unnecessary. He was weak, powerless. The man who had once faced entire armies now lay on the ground, unable to resist. His confidence in his own physical prowess had blinded him to the true source of his strength. The Philistines seized him easily. Their fear of him had vanished, replaced by triumph. They bound him tightly, and in a cruel act of humiliation, they gouged out his eyes. The man who had once seen God's plan unfold was now plunged into darkness. They took him to Gaza, a major Philistine city, and imprisoned him, putting him to work grinding grain in the prison mill. This was a deliberate act of degradation, forcing Israel's former hero into servitude. The Philistines celebrated their victory, believing they had finally neutralized the threat Samson had posed to their dominance. They attributed their success to their own power, failing to see the hand of God working even in this tragedy. In the darkness of his captivity, Samson had time to reflect on his life, his choices, and his failures. The pain of his blindness was perhaps less severe than the pain of his broken vows and his betrayal of God's trust. Stripped of his strength and sight, Samson was at his lowest point. Yet, in this despair, a subtle change began to occur. The scriptures tell us that the hair of his head began to grow again, after it had been shaved. This detail is significant. It signifies not just a physical regrowth, but a potential spiritual renewal. As Samson's hair grew, so too did his reliance on God. His pride had been shattered, and in its place, a humble dependence began to emerge. The Philistines, still celebrating their triumph, made a fatal mistake. They underestimated the power of repentance and the enduring nature of God's promises. They gathered in their thousands for a great festival to their god, Dagon, to offer sacrifices and celebrate their victory over Samson. They brought Samson from the prison, to make sport of him, a final act of humiliation for their captive enemy. Blind and weakened, Samson was led into the crowded temple, where thousands of Philistine men and women had gathered. They mocked him and reveled in his downfall. But in the heart of this broken man, a final prayer was forming. Samson called out to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me, please God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." This was not a prayer for personal glory, but a plea for God's strength to fulfill his original mission to deliver Israel from the Philistines. Standing between the 2 central pillars that supported the temple, Samson asked the young boy who was leading him to guide his hands to them. He grasped the massive pillars, one with his right hand and the other with his left, and with a final surge of divinely granted strength, Samson cried out, "Let me die with the Philistines." He pushed with all his might, and the pillars gave way. The temple collapsed, falling on the Philistine rulers and all the people who were inside. The Bible records that the dead he killed in his death were more than those he had killed during his lifetime. Samson's final act, though tragic, was a victory. It marked a significant blow to the Philistine oppression, and ultimately paved the way for Israel's future. Deliverance. Samson's story is a complex one, a tapestry of great strength and profound weakness, of divine calling and human failing. His downfall was not simply due to Delilah's betrayal, but also his own choices, his impulsiveness, and his inability to fully submit to God's will. Delilah, on the other hand, remains a figure shrouded in intrigue. Was she motivated purely by greed? The Philistine leaders offered her a substantial sum of money to betray Samson, a reward that would have secured her financial future. The scriptures state that each of the 5 Philistine rulers offered her 1,100 shekels of silver, a considerable amount in those times. This financial incentive undoubtedly played a role in her decision, but was it the only motivation? Fear could have also been a factor. The Philistines were a powerful force, and Delilah lived in their territory. She may have feared the consequences of refusing their demands, or the potential repercussions. If Samson ever turned against her. Living in a border region, she would have been acutely aware of the power dynamics at play. Her loyalty may have been divided, or perhaps she saw aligning herself with the Philistines as a means of survival. Or was there something even darker at play? Did Delilah harbor resentment towards Samson? Perhaps she felt used or unappreciated. The scriptures do not explicitly reveal her personal feelings or her past interactions with Samson beyond their romantic relationship. However, the persistence with which she pursued his secret suggests a motivation beyond mere financial gain. It is possible that she sought power or influence within Philistine society and saw Samson's downfall as a way to achieve it. Or perhaps, driven by a sense of national loyalty, she genuinely believed she was acting in the best interests of her people, seeing Samson as a threat to their stability. The truth about Delilah's motivations remains somewhat elusive, lost to the passage of time and the brevity of the biblical account. What we do know is that her actions had devastating consequences, not only for Samson, but for the relationship between Israel and the Philistines. Samson's story serves as a powerful reminder that even the most gifted individuals are susceptible to human weakness, and that true strength comes not from physical prowess, but from unwavering faith and obedience to God. His life is a cautionary tale about the dangers of pride, impulsivity, and the failure to recognize the source of our blessings, yet it is also a story of redemption. Even in his darkest hour, God heard Samson's prayer and used his final act to fulfill his purpose. Samson's legacy extends beyond his incredible feats of strength. He is remembered as a judge of Israel, a leader who, despite his flaws, played a crucial role in their struggle for freedom. His story continues to resonate with readers today, exploring themes of power, temptation, betrayal, and ultimately, the enduring grace of God. Have you ever considered the weight of such a calling? To be chosen from birth for a divine purpose? Samson's life was not his own. He was set apart, consecrated. Imagine the pressure of knowing your strength, but was not yours to wield freely, but a gift with specific conditions. His long hair was not merely a physical attribute, it was a visible symbol of his devotion, a tangible link to his power. Think about the times in your own life when you knew you were meant for something more. A path laid out before you, perhaps. Not as dramatic as delivering a nation, but a calling nonetheless. The weight of expectation, the struggle between personal desires, and the pull of a greater purpose. Samson's internal conflict is a mirror, reflecting our own battles. The times we've strayed from what we know is right. Drawn by temptation, or blinded by our own desires. His choice of a Philistine wife, against the wishes of his parents, was the first crack in his foundation, sign that his personal will. Was beginning to overshadow his divine mandate. How often do we make decisions, knowing they go against the wisdom of those who care for us, ignoring the subtle warnings, in favor of what our hearts momentarily crave? Samson saw this woman, and his desire trumped all else, the potential consequences for his people. His own consecrated life seemed secondary in that moment. Lust can be a powerful force, blinding us to reason, leading us down paths we later regret. His parents' concern was not born of prejudice alone. They understood the inherent dangers of aligning with the enemy, the cultural and spiritual divide. Yet, Samson, in his youthful confidence, believed he could navigate this, even use it to his advantage. This is the occasion I desire of the Philistines. He saw an opportunity for conflict, but failed to recognize the deeper implications, the entanglement that would eventually lead to his ruin. Sometimes, what we perceive as an opportunity is actually a carefully laid trap. Our eagerness to act blinds us to the hidden dangers. His heroic deeds that followed were undoubtedly acts of God's power, manifested through him. The lion he tore apart with his bare hands, a testament to a strength beyond human capability. Imagine that raw, untamed power surging through you, the fear it must have instilled in his enemies, the awe it inspired in his people. Yet, even these victories did not seem to instill in Samson a deeper sense of humility or reliance on God. He continued to operate with a degree of independence, his strength becoming a tool for his own purposes as much as for God's. The incident with the foxes and the Philistine fields, a display of cunning and retribution, but also a sign of escalating conflict. Fueled by personal grievance, the slaughter of the 30 Philistine men over a riddle and a wager. Again, a demonstration of his power, but also a hint of his volatile temper and his tendency towards impulsive actions. These early displays of strength, while delivering victories, also revealed a character flawed by pride and self-will. He was a hero, but a deeply human one, subject to the same weaknesses that plague us all. Then came Delilah, a figure who has captivated imaginations for centuries, the ultimate femme fatale, the betrayer. But was she simply a villain, or a complex character, caught in a web of circumstances? Her beauty is emphasized in the narrative, a tool she undoubtedly used to her advantage. But beauty alone cannot explain her actions. The Philistine lords were strategic. They understood Samson's weakness for women, and they chose their agent carefully. They appealed to her greed, a powerful motivator. The promise of wealth and security, 1,100 shekels of silver from each ruler, a king's ransom, enough to change her life forever. Consider the societal pressures she might have faced, living in Philistine territory. The expectations of her people. Was she a patriot acting in what she believed were her nation's interests, or simply an opportunist seeking personal gain? The text leaves room for interpretation, adding to the enduring mystery of her character. Her initial attempts to uncover Samson's secret show a degree of cunning and persistence. She didn't give up easily. Even after being proven wrong multiple times, she played on Samson's emotions, his trust, his affection. How can you say "I love you" when you won't confide in me? A classic manipulation tactic, guilt-tripping him into revealing his vulnerabilities. Samson, blinded by his feelings for her, failed to see the trap being laid. His desire for intimacy overrode his sense of caution. Each lie he told, each test she put him through, should have been a warning, a red flag signaling danger. But love, or what he perceived as love, can make us ignore the most obvious signs. We want to believe the best in those we care for, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. His final revelation, the admission that his hair was the source of his strength, was an act of profound vulnerability, a complete surrender of his secret. Perhaps he was exhausted by her relentless questioning, or perhaps a part of him longed to share this burden with someone he trusted. He laid his power in her hands, figuratively and literally. A fatal mistake. Delilah's swift action, once she knew the truth, reveals her calculated intent. There was no hesitation, no turning back. The cutting of his hair, a symbolic severing of his connection with God. The physical manifestation of his broken vow. The loss of his strength was immediate. The man who could single-handedly defeat armies became as weak as any other. His awakening to find himself powerless must have been a moment of profound terror and despair. The realization of his betrayal, and the consequences of his choices. The Philistines' swift capture. their ease in overpowering him. A stark contrast to their previous fear, the gouging out of his eyes, a brutal act of humiliation and dominance, depriving him of his sight, his ability to see the world, and perhaps, symbolically, his spiritual vision forced into servitude, grinding grain like an animal. The mighty Samson reduced to a common laborer, a public spectacle of defeat. This period of darkness and captivity, however, became a time of reflection, a crucible of suffering. The seemingly insignificant detail, that his hair began to grow, again, holds a powerful message of hope and redemption. It suggests that even in our deepest failures, God's grace can still be at work. A chance for renewal, a possibility of restoration. Samson's physical regrowth mirrored a spiritual reawakening. His pride had been stripped away, replaced by a humble reliance on God. The Philistine festival, to Dagon, their celebration of victory, was premature. They failed to understand that God's plans cannot be thwarted by human actions. Their arrogance led them to bring Samson into the temple, to mock him, to parade their triumph. But this became the stage for his final act. His last prayer, a plea not for personal vindication, but for the strength to fulfill his calling. Strengthen me just once more, a desperate cry from a broken man who had finally understood the true source of his power. His positioning between the pillars, a symbolic return to the foundation of strength, not his own physical might, but the unwavering support of God. Let me die with the Philistines. A selfless act of sacrifice, his own life offered up to deliver his people. The collapse of the temple, a devastating blow to the Philistine leadership. Their victory celebration turned into a mass funeral. Samson's death, though tragic, was the ultimate fulfillment of his divine mission. He achieved more in his final moments than in many of his celebrated victories. His story is a powerful reminder that God can use even our failures for His greater purpose, that redemption is always possible, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. Delilah's fate after Samson's death is not recorded in Scripture. She disappears from the narrative, leaving us to speculate about the consequences of her actions. Did she enjoy her ill-gotten gains? Did she live a life of security and power? Or did she eventually face retribution for her betrayal? The silence surrounding her end perhaps serves as a reminder that the rewards of treachery are often fleeting, and that true fulfillment is found not in personal gain, but in aligning ourselves with a higher purpose. Samson's life, with all its complexities and contradictions, remains a testament to the power of God, working through flawed individuals to accomplish His will. His story is not just about a strong man and a treacherous woman, it's about the struggle between flesh and spirit, the consequences of disobedience, and the enduring possibility of redemption. It challenges us to examine our own weaknesses, our own tendencies towards pride and self-will, and to recognize the true source of our strength. Are we relying on our own abilities, or are we rooted in a deeper faith? Are we allowing our desires to lead us astray, or are we seeking God's guidance in our decisions? Samson's life was a roller coaster of highs and lows, moments of incredible power and devastating weakness. But ultimately, it was a life used by God to achieve His purposes. Even in his death, he fulfilled the destiny that was foretold before his birth, to begin the deliverance of Israel from the hand of the Philistines. His story is a powerful reminder that God's plans will prevail, even when we stumble and fall. His grace is sufficient. His mercy endures. Reflect on the choices Samson made, the moments where he prioritized his own desires over his calling. Can you see parallels in your own life? Times when you knew what you should do, but chose a different path. The consequences of those choices, the lessons learned, and the ever-present opportunity to turn back, to seek forgiveness, and to realign ourselves with our true purpose. Samson's final act of faith, his desperate prayer in the face of death, shows us that it is never too late to turn to God, to seek His strength, and to allow Him to use us, even in our brokenness. His story is a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, when it is surrendered to the divine, and a reminder that true strength comes not from ourselves, but from the God who created us, and who has a plan for each of our lives. A plan that can still be fulfilled, even when we have strayed far from the path. The story of Samson and Delilah, a timeless tale of strength, betrayal, and redemption. A story that continues to speak to the human condition. Across centuries and cultures, have you ever wondered about the unseen forces at play in our lives? The spiritual battles that rage beneath the surface of our everyday experiences. Samson's strength was clearly supernatural, a direct gift from God. But the forces that sought to undermine him were also powerful. The greed of the Philistine leaders, the cunning of Delilah, the temptations that plagued Samson himself. These are forces that continue to operate in our world today. The allure of wealth and power, the manipulation of others for personal gain, the constant battle against our own desires. Samson's story reminds us to be vigilant, to guard our hearts, and to recognize the true source of our strength. It's a call to humility, to acknowledge our dependence on God, and to resist the temptation to rely solely on our own abilities. His life was a powerful demonstration that physical strength without spiritual discipline is ultimately vulnerable, and that true and lasting power comes from a deep and abiding connection with the divine. Consider the symbols in the story. Samson's uncut hair, a tangible representation of his covenant with God. The moment it was cut signified a broken promise, a severed connection. Delilah's beauty, a deceptive facade hiding a treacherous heart. The Philistine temple, to Dagon, symbol of false worship, and the ultimate futility of relying on idols. These symbols enrich the narrative, adding layers of meaning to the events, and offering insights into the spiritual truths at play. Samson's story is not just an ancient account, it's a mirror reflecting our own struggles, our own temptations, and our own potential for both great strength and profound weakness. It's a reminder that we are all engaged in a spiritual battle, and that our ultimate victory lies not in our own power, but in our unwavering faith in God. So, as you reflect on the tragic tale of Samson and Delilah, consider the lessons it holds for your own life. Where are you placing your trust? What are the things that could potentially lead to your downfall? And what steps can you take to strengthen your connection with the divine source of true strength? Samson's story ends in tragedy, but within that tragedy, there is also a powerful message of hope and redemption. Even in our darkest moments, God's grace can prevail, and our weaknesses can be transformed into strengths. When we surrender ourselves to His will, His life, though flawed, ultimately served God's purpose, and His final act of faith secured a measure of deliverance. For His people, may we learn from His mistakes, embrace His moments of faith, and strive to live lives that are fully surrendered to the God who gives us strength and purpose. That the story of Samson, a powerful reminder of the human condition and the enduring grace of God. Even in the face of our failures, His love remains steadfast, His promises endure, and redemption is always within reach. If we turn to Him with a humble and contrite heart, just as Samson did in his final moments, finding strength, not in himself, but in the God who never abandoned him, even when he abandoned himself. A testament to a love that knows no bounds, and a mercy that extends, even to the most broken. A story that echoes through the ages. A warning and an inspiration to all who strive to live a life of purpose and faith. In a world filled with temptation and deceit, the choice, ultimately, is ours. To follow the path of strength and obedience, or to succumb to the allure of our own desires. May we choose wisely, and may we always remember the true source of our strength. In the end, Samson's strength didn't fail him. His judgment did. He gave away the secret of his calling to someone who never valued it. But even in his blindness, even in chains, God was not done with him. His last act was not a fall, but a sacrifice. Samson's story reminds us that divine purpose is powerful, but without discipline, even the strongest fall. So guard your calling, honor your purpose, and never let temporary desire cost you eternal destiny.